Have you ever caught yourself going through the motions, walking through your days like you're sleepwalking with your eyes open? You wake up, check your phone, go through the routine, interact with people, complete tasks. But somewhere deep down, there's this hollow feeling like you're watching your own life happen from behind glass. You're technically awake, but something vital is missing, something that makes you feel truly alive. Most people accept this as normal. They tell themselves this is just what being an adult feels like, that the spark they once had was just youthful naivety. But what if I told you that feeling isn't maturity? What if that numbness, that sense of drifting through life, is actually a symptom of something much deeper? Something that's been slowly draining the life force out of you without you even realizing it. There's a difference between being awake and being alive. And most of us have forgotten what that difference feels like. We've become so used to existing in this strange middle ground, this liminal space between sleeping and truly living, that we don't even recognize we're stuck there. We think consciousness means being alert, being productive, being busy. But consciousness without aliveness is just sophisticated sleepwalking. You see, there are millions of people walking around who look awake, who function perfectly well in society, who meet their obligations and go through all the right motions. But inside, they feel like ghosts of themselves. They remember having dreams, having passions, having moments where time seemed to stop because they were so present, so engaged with life. But now those moments feel like distant memories from another lifetime. This isn't about depression, though it might feel similar. This isn't about lacking motivation, though that might be part of it. This is about something more fundamental. It's about the gradual disconnection from your own aliveness, the slow fade from vibrant presence to mechanical existence. And here's the thing that nobody talks about. This disconnection doesn't happen overnight. It's so gradual, so subtle, that by the time you notice it, you've been living half alive for years. Think about a child watching a butterfly land on a flower. Their eyes light up. They become completely absorbed in that moment. Time doesn't exist. There's no past, no future, just pure fascination with what's happening right now. That's aliveness. That's what we've lost. Not the childishness, but the capacity to be fully present with life as it unfolds. But somewhere along the way, we learn to live in our heads instead of in our bodies. We learn to think about life instead of feeling it. We became observers of our own experience rather than participants in it. We started analyzing every moment instead of simply receiving it. And slowly, imperceptibly, we began to feel like strangers in our own lives. The modern world doesn't help. Everything around us is designed to keep us in this half-awake state. We're constantly stimulated, but rarely satisfied, always consuming, but never truly nourished. We fill every moment with noise, with distraction, with busyness, because somewhere deep down, we're afraid of what we might find in the silence. We're afraid of discovering just how disconnected we've become. But here's what's fascinating about this condition. It's not permanent. It's not a character flaw or a life sentence. It's simply the result of forgetting how to access something that's always been there. Like a muscle that's atrophied from lack of use, your capacity for aliveness is still there. It's just buried under layers of habits, patterns, and ways of being that have slowly accumulated over time. Most people spend their entire lives trying to solve this feeling from the outside. They change jobs, change relationships, change locations, thinking that if they just rearrange the external circumstances of their life, they'll suddenly feel alive again. But aliveness isn't something you find out there. It's not a destination you arrive at or a goal you achieve. It's a way of being that emerges from within. The problem is, we've been conditioned to believe that feeling fully alive is somehow dangerous, impractical, or unrealistic. We've been taught that growing up means dimming our inner light, that being responsible means sacrificing our vitality, that being mature means accepting a life of quiet resignation. But what if that's all backwards? What if true maturity is learning to stay alive while navigating the complexities of adult life? There's something profound that happens when you begin to recognize the difference between existing and living. It's like waking up from a dream you didn't even know you were having. Suddenly, colors seem more vivid, conversations feel more real, simple moments carry more weight. You start to notice things you've been walking past for years. The quality of light at different times of day, the rhythm of your own breathing, the way your body responds to different environments. This isn't about becoming more emotional or more dramatic. It's about becoming more present, more connected to the actual experience of being alive, rather than just thinking about being alive. It's about moving from your head back into your whole being, from analysis to direct experience, from commentary to participation. But here's where it gets interesting. The path back to aliveness isn't what most people expect. It's not about adding more to your life. It's not about filling your schedule with exciting activities or forcing yourself to feel things you don't naturally feel. In fact, it's often the opposite. It's about removing the barriers that have built up between you and your own natural vitality. These barriers are invisible but incredibly powerful. They're made up of assumptions about how life should feel, expectations about what happiness looks like, and beliefs about what's possible for someone like you. They're constructed from years of prioritizing safety over aliveness, comfort over growth, predictability over presence. The journey back to feeling fully alive requires something that most people aren't prepared for. It requires you to question everything you've accepted as normal about your inner experience. It requires you to challenge the voice in your head that says, "This is just how life is now." It requires you to consider the possibility that you've been settling for a diluted version of existence without even realizing it. And here's the part that changes everything. Once you start to see how much of your life you've been experiencing secondhand, through the filter of your thoughts rather than through direct contact with reality, you can't unsee it. Once you recognize the difference between being awake and being alive, you can't go back to pretending they're the same thing. This recognition is both liberating and terrifying. Liberating because it means the feeling of being half dead isn't permanent. Terrifying because it means you have to take responsibility for how disconnected you've become. You can't blame it on circumstances or other people or bad luck. You have to acknowledge that somewhere along the way, you chose safety over aliveness, and now you have to choose again. But before you can make that choice consciously, you need to understand exactly how this disconnection happened. You need to see the specific ways you've been sleepwalking through your own life, because awareness is the first step toward transformation. And transformation is the only thing that will bridge the gap between existing and truly living. In the next part, we're going to explore the exact mechanisms that keep you trapped in this half-alive state. We're going to look at the subtle ways you've been avoiding your own life without even knowing it. Because once you can see the pattern clearly, you can finally begin to break free from it. The mechanism that keeps you trapped in this half-alive state is simpler than you think, but recognizing it requires brutal honesty. You've been living in constant preparation for life instead of actually living it. You wake up preparing for the day ahead. You go through the day preparing for tomorrow. You live the week preparing for the weekend. You spend months preparing for that vacation, that promotion, that relationship that will finally make everything feel right. But here's the devastating truth. While you've been preparing to live, life has been happening. While you've been waiting for the right moment, the perfect circumstances, the ideal emotional state, thousands of moments have passed you by unnoticed. You've been so focused on getting somewhere else that you forgot to show up where you are. This isn't your fault. You were taught this. You were conditioned to believe that the present moment is just a stepping stone to something better. That satisfaction lives in the future. That aliveness is something you earn after you've checked all the right boxes, achieved all the right goals, fixed all the right problems. But aliveness doesn't live in the future. It doesn't exist in your plans or your dreams or your carefully constructed vision of how things should be. Aliveness exists only in this moment, in the space between your last breath and your next one, in the gap between one thought and another, in the pause before you react automatically to whatever life presents. Most people miss this completely because they're addicted to the story in their head, the narrative about who they are, where they're going, what they need to be happy. They live inside this mental movie, commenting on everything, analyzing everything, comparing everything to how it should be different. And while they're lost in this internal dialogue, life is happening all around them. You know that feeling when you're driving somewhere familiar and suddenly realize you can't remember the last 10 minutes of the journey. Your body was there, your hands were on the wheel, your eyes were on the road, but you weren't present. You were somewhere else entirely, lost in thought. That's how most people live their entire lives. Physically present, but mentally elsewhere. The path back to aliveness begins with a radical shift in attention. Instead of living in the commentary about your experience, you start living in the experience itself. Instead of thinking about breathing, you feel yourself breathing. Instead of analyzing how you feel, you simply allow yourself to feel. Instead of planning the next moment, you receive this one. This sounds simple, but it's revolutionary. Because when you stop living in the story about your life and start living in your actual life, everything changes. Colors become more vivid. Not because they've changed, but because you're finally seeing them. Conversations become more meaningful. Not because people are saying different things, but because you're finally listening. Your body feels more alive, not because it's different, but because you're finally inhabiting it. But here's where most people get stuck. They try to force this shift. They try to think their way into presence, which is like trying to use fire to put out fire. The very effort to be more alive keeps you trapped in your head, analyzing whether you're doing it right, measuring your progress, comparing this moment to some ideal of what aliveness should feel like. True aliveness emerges when you stop trying to create it and start removing what's blocking it. It's already there underneath all the mental noise, all the emotional armor, all the habitual ways you've learned to disconnect from direct experience. You don't need to add anything. You need to subtract everything that's not essential. Start with your breath, not because breathing exercises will make you more alive, but because your breath is always happening now. It's the most intimate connection you have to this moment. When you feel disconnected from life, return to your breath, not to control it, not to make it deeper or slower or better, but simply to notice that it's happening without your management. Then notice your body. Really notice it. The weight of your clothes against your skin, the temperature of the air, the subtle sensations that are always there but usually ignored. Your body is your anchor to the present moment. It can't exist anywhere else. When your mind is spinning stories about the past or the future, your body is always here now, alive. Next, start noticing the space between your thoughts. Most people believe they are their thoughts, that the constant mental chatter is who they are. But thoughts are just events happening in your awareness, like clouds passing through the sky. You are the sky, not the clouds. In the space between thoughts, there's a natural aliveness that requires no effort, no improvement, no management. This isn't about becoming a different person. It's about remembering who you already are underneath all the layers of conditioning. It's about returning to the natural state you knew before you learned to live in your head, before you started believing that life was something to be figured out rather than something to be lived. The moment you stop trying to get somewhere else and start being where you are, aliveness returns. not as the achievement or a goal reached, but as a recognition of what was always present. You realize you weren't broken. You weren't missing anything. You were just looking in the wrong direction. Life is not a problem to be solved. It's not a puzzle to be figured out. It's not a test to be passed. It's a gift to be received, moment by moment, breath by breath. And the only requirement for receiving it fully is to stop preparing for it and start living it right now. As you read these words, life is happening. Your heart is beating. Your breath is flowing. Your awareness is present. This isn't practice for living. This is living. Stop waiting for permission to feel fully alive. You already have everything you need. You always have. The question isn't whether you can become alive. The question is whether you're willing to stop pretending you're not already alive right now. The answer to that question will determine everything that follows.